The ink smelled of oak gall and desperation. Cartographer Nicolaus Germanus set down his quill. In the upper left corner of his 1466 edition of Ptolemy's Geography, he had just drawn a coastline that no European had ever seen, a vast northern landmass labelled Ultima Thule. It stretched from Norway to the edge of the known world. He did not know, could not have known, that his brushstroke would echo across 200 years of maps, that sailors would die searching for its shores, and that one day scholars would call it the most successful lie in cartographic history. Calm. For most of recorded history, the northern edge of the world was not empty. It was occupied. Not by ice or fog, but by empire, a civilization so powerful that Greek poets called it Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind. Roman geographers named it Thule. Arab cartographers drew it as Rikab. Chinese astronomers charted its movements. It appeared on maps for over 2,000 years, always in the same place, always described the same way. A blessed realm of eternal sunshine, gold-domed palaces, and people who lived for 1,000 years. Then, around 1,650, it vanished. Not gradually, not with explanation. It simply stopped being drawn. The question that haunts this story is not where it went, it is why it was there at all. Calm. The earliest account comes from Herodotus, writing in 450 BCE. He recorded a tale told by Scythian traders. Beyond the land of the Hyperboreans lay an island where Apollo was born, circled by a silver column that caught the sunrise. Pliny the Elder, in 77 CE, listed Hyperboreans as a real people, citing their lifespan of over 200 years and their annual pilgrimage to deliver sacred offerings wrapped in straw. Aristotle, Melapomponius, Diodorus Siculus all mention this northern civilization as matter-of-factly as they mentioned Rome or Carthage. No one questioned its existence. The real question is not who believed in it, but why belief was so universal across cultures that had no contact with each other. Calm. By the medieval period, Hyperborea had transformed. It was no longer a poetic abstraction but a cartographic fixture. The Hereford Mappa Mundi, drawn in 1300, placed a crowned king at the northern edge of the world. The Framara map of 1450 showed a massive island at the top of the globe, complete with mountains and rivers. Even as Columbus sailed west in 1492, he carried maps that showed a warm northern continent, not Antarctica, but something his sources called Bacalar. Portuguese sailors in the 1500s reported sighting a green island in the far North Atlantic, surrounded by fog so thick it seemed to breathe. They named it Flush with the Language of Fear. Today, we call that region the Greenland Sea. The question is what they actually saw. The most disturbing map appeared in 1513. Admiral Piri Reis, an Ottoman naval commander, presented a world map to his sultan. Among its fragments copied from 20 source maps, some reportedly from the Library of Alexandria, was a coastline in the southern hemisphere. It matched the actual outline of Antarctica with startling accuracy, including subglacial mountain ranges that were not confirmed by sonar until 1958. The map also depicted a large island in the North Atlantic that matched no known landmass. When a 1959 geological survey examined the ocean floor near that location, they found it, or rather, what was left of it. A drowned continental shelf. Mountains that had once stood above sea level, now buried under half a mile of water. The admiral who drew that map had access to sources he should not have possessed. Calm. Mainstream archaeology offers a clean explanation. These maps reflect nothing but human imagination and cartographic superstition. The ancient sources, they argue, were simply repeating stories from traders who had never traveled north of the Black Sea. Medieval mapmakers copied classical texts without question. The Admiral Piri Reis map was compiled from dozens of sources over centuries. Errors compounded into accuracy. The underwater mountains in the North Atlantic are irrelevant. They could not have supported a civilization. The matching coastlines are coincidence or misinterpretation. This explanation is reasonable. It is also, historians must admit, the same explanation given for Atlantis in 1627, when it was finally removed from official maps. And yet, the question that lingers is not why the Phantom Empire appeared, it is why it appeared everywhere, in every culture, for 2,000 years, with consistent details that never changed. Dread. Consider the locations. Every map places the Phantom Empire in one of three regions: the far North Atlantic, the far North Pacific, or at the poles. These are the least hospitable regions on Earth, the last places where anyone would imagine a utopia. Yet the descriptions are uniform. Eternal daylight, mild climate, gold and silver in abundance. People who do not grow old. These details do not match the Arctic. They do not match Antarctica. They match a place that existed before the last ice age, when sea levels were 400 feet lower and the continents looked different. They match a place that drowned 12,000 years ago. The pattern, if you follow it, points not to imagination, but to memory degraded, fragmented, and carried by survivors who built new civilizations from the wreckage of the old. What if the Phantom Empire was never one place? What if it was a projection, a wish, encoded as geography? Historians have noticed something strange about these maps. They were drawn not by explorers, but by scholars, priests, and kings. Maps in the ancient world were not tools for navigation. They were statements of power. To place an empire at the edge of the known world was to claim the world itself, to suggest that your civilization extended to the limits of the earth. The Phantom Empire may have been a cartographic fiction, placed on maps not because it existed, but because its absence would have implied weakness. Every culture that drew it claimed it as their own. The Greeks called it Hyperborea. The Romans called it Thule. The Norse called it Bjorn. The map in this reading is not a record of geography. It is a mirror. Calm. And yet the mirror does not explain everything. The Admiral Piri Reis map was not a political statement. It was a practical navigation chart, used by Ottoman naval commanders for 2 centuries. Its Antarctic coastline was accurate for reasons no one has satisfactorily explained. The drowned mountains in the North Atlantic are geologically real, dated to a period when they stood above water. The consistent descriptions of mild climate and eternal daylight are not fantasy. They describe conditions that existed in northern Europe during the Rhenian interglacial period, 12,000 years ago. These are not the details of imagination. They are the details of observation, filtered through millennia of retelling. The question is not whether the Phantom Empire existed. The question is, what kind of evidence would convince us to look? In 2021, a team of geologists from the University of Newfoundland published a paper on the Flemish Cap, a seamount in the North Atlantic. Beneath the seafloor, they found pollen grains pine, oak, and spruce from a temperate forest ecosystem. Carbon dating placed the forest at 11,000 years old. It had grown on an island that no longer exists, in a region now covered by water a mile deep. The paper noted, almost in passing, that ancient texts described exactly such an island in exactly that location. No one followed up. The finding was not considered relevant to history, but if you stand at the edge of the maps literally, at the edge where cartographers place their Phantom Empire, and you look down, you see water. And beneath the water, if you know how to look, you see a coastline that once knew sunlight. Calm. The Phantom Empire vanished from maps in 1652, not because it was disproven, but because a generation of scholars decided that the uncharted was no longer acceptable, that a complete map must be a finished map. They drew a line at the edge of what they knew and called everything beyond imagination. But the water remembers, the seabed remembers, the pollen in the sediment remembers a forest that grew where no forest grows now. And the maps, the old maps, the ones that filled their edges with legends, those maps remember too. They remember a world that was larger than we were willing to believe. The question that Phantom Atlas leaves for you tonight is simple. When we draw lines around what we know, what do we lose?